Check this one out. We got some Oregon dog culture that has made it to the desk of Dr. Todd Grande channel. This is a fun channel to watch. So shout out again to the Dr. Todd Grande channel. But let's have a look at this story. And I'll just show you a short clip from his video and then we'll get deeper into the story. In the description will be your homework.
And vindictive. That is not the case with Steven Milner. He was generally loved by the people in his community. He was described as a caring man with a wry sense of humor. One former receptionist said Steven was the best boss she ever had, professional, kind, and generous. When Steven had to euthanize pets, he would send sympathy cards to the owners. He once made a donation to a university in the name of a border collie. Steven's good reputation was a problem for Kenny because it was hard for the police to believe that Steven was a bad guy.
Yep, because he was local dog worshipping veterinarian, and so he used the dogs to hide himself. Even the police refused to look at all the evidence against Steve Milner. So now let's go over to the article. This is actually the article that's used by the Todd Grande channel. So it's called Everybody Loved the Veterinarian Who Stalked Kenny Fandrich. Steve Milner was a veterinarian. He had an affair with the wife of Kenny and eventually killed Kenny. It took him a bunch of stalking and death threats and trespassing and putting GPSs on their cars. But that's what he was doing. And the reason he got away with it is because everybody thought that this Kenny guy right here, they thought he was just full of shit. Because how dare you speak out about this great dog person? Yeah. In our article, we can read that Milner had been a fixture in Oregon City for 20 years. He ran a veterinary practice that treated family pets for 38,000 residents. So you see, all he had to do was impress a bunch of dog owners. It doesn't matter if he was doing a bunch of other criminal stuff in the background. Dog ownership is a sure way to make yourself look good. And look at what it says here. Kenny Fandrich claimed he was being stalked by the nicest man in town. Yeah, he was considered by many as the nicest man in town. If you read about Milner, it's always about dogs, you know. They entrusted dogs to him. Everything in here is about dogs. In fact, let's do a keyword search for dogs. We got 5. So, let me show you something about the presence of dogs. It's not just hiding the veterinarian. Dogs are culpable throughout this whole story. First, Milner had euthanized dogs without the owner's consent. However, it just got covered up. It says here the board dropped the investigation. So, of course, it was covered up because he was raking in tons of money, tax-free donations for all of these dog-type charities. So, it shows you that even if you are hurting dogs, if you promote yourself as a dog lover, you can still get away with that as well. Another part about this where the dog ownership didn't help anybody and also made it worse. Read this little part right here. So Kenny and Tanya, that's the couple affected by this crazy murder and veterinarian, they built a house in Oregon City and they filled it with pets. 6 dogs. So they had 6 dogs, yet Steven Milner was able to get on their property, put GPS trackers on their cars, sneak around their property. The dogs offered no protection from this murderer. In fact, he probably knew what treats to give those dogs so he could sneak on their property. Yeah, and let me show you something else here. One of the reasons that Tanya cheated on her husband, she says, I was lonely and someone was paying attention to me. You have 6 dogs on your property and other pets. They probably had more dogs because if you read deeper into the story, it seems like she was helping with some of the dogs from the office. So, again, the presence of dogs does not fix loneliness. It does not fix stress. The presence of those dogs with Tanya and Kenny, it probably helped them look at their murderer guy, Steve Milner, as, oh, he's probably a good guy. He likes dogs. We like dogs. We're all just good people because we love dogs. The presence of those dogs just pulled the wool over the eyes of the woman, the man, the murderer, even the locals and the police, because how could this guy that gave money to all these colleges, how could he be doing anything bad? According to the story, in September 2018, Tanya and Kenny were at their house. Kenny is the one that's murdered. Tanya is the cheating wife with Steve. Um, they found Milner in a blue hoodie lying underneath of Kenny's Dodge Ram. So how do you have 6 protector dogs, 6 family dogs, and a guy is trespassing on your property? You see, the presence of the dogs did nothing to help with this. And in fact, the presence of the dogs helped all this move along. They helped shroud the reality of Steve Milner and his plans of murder and stalking. And what about Steve Milner? He's a dog person, so how come he couldn't just de-stress from not having this woman anymore? Because Tanya did dump him to go back with her husband. And like it says here in 2019, Milner's screaming outside of the front door, threatening to cut him into 1,000 pieces. So again, the presence of the dogs is not helping anybody. Like, if dog ownership makes your life so great, why do you need to be cheating and stalking and running away from your husband? How come your property is easily accessible by somebody that wants to murder you when you have 6 dogs? How can you be a police officer and not look at real evidence provided to you just because the evidence goes against a dog owner? When Tanya quit working at Milner's veterinary office, he came to her new place of employment, and he says he showed up at the clinic with a dog and demanded Tanya treat it. So he was using the presence of the dog to kind of wedge himself back in too. Like, oh, look at me, I've made death threats on you and your husband, but here's a puppy. Here's a part of the story that I found interesting. A Hillsborough police officer pulled Milner over and gave him a stern warning. It was because he was following the guy that he ended up murdering. He was following Kenny. And as it says here, the officer determined there was probable cause to arrest a veterinarian for stalking. And a police report was filed. But look, the sheriff's office made no arrest. And the sheriff's office is in Clackamas County, which is where the veterinarian came from. So the sheriff's office probably were a bunch of people that had their dogs given treats and special treatment by him. So the presence of the dogs also allowed him to get away with his stalking because the law enforcement agencies knew him as a great veterinarian. And it seems even after Milner was sentenced to prison, after they collected evidence after evidence on him, look what it says: Milner's neighbors think he's innocent. It's so crazy how deep the brainwashing goes of thinking that anything associated with the love of a dog is just fine. They won't look past it. They won't look past it when it comes to murder, stalking, the death of toddlers all over our country. So, yep, this Oregon dog culture proves that our beloved award-winning veterinarian, just because he was associated with golden retrievers and all kinds of charities for dogs, that doesn't make him a good person. And the fact that our society believes that makes him a good person is how he was able to torture Kenny and Tanya and then end up almost getting away with murdering Kenny just because of the presence of dogs. See you guys later.